Hi, everyone. I'm Atul Garg, an AmeriCorps member at the Baltimore Community Mediation Center, and welcome to our Peacemaker series, where we meet individuals and community organizations that exemplify the qualities of service and volunteerism. This month, I'm excited to introduce to you Liz Stoner from the Pro Bono Counseling Project's WARMLine. Welcome, Liz, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Great. So actually, before we learn more about PBCP's WARMLine, can you tell us about the work that PBCP does and also how the pro bono piece, which honestly I've always equated with free legal services, how that fits into that?
Sure. The mission of the Pro Bono Counseling Project is to ensure that Marylanders with limited resources who are requesting mental health care are provided access to volunteer licensed mental health professionals and any other necessary supportive services that they might need. Pro Bono Counseling Project serves the entire state of Maryland, and they've existed for about 30 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Very long, yes. And pro bono, the definition, it means for the public good. So it usually used to mean free professional services, but in this case, it's mental health counseling. So those who call are connected to either a volunteer mental health provider or another low-cost community resource based on their individual needs.
Okay, great. And might that person actually be you that they end up chatting with?
Yes, they might end up chatting with me.
Okay, great. So I know you have some special programs such as Chai for the South Asian and Indian communities, and also a program for the Spanish-speaking community. In addition to programs that address language and culture-specific issues, what other special programs does PBCP offer?
Yes, so we try to make sure that every person who calls is given really individualized attention for their specific concerns. And we have special programs which we do targeted outreach, and that includes outreach to, like you said, South Asian Americans, Spanish speakers, victims of crime, military members, veterans and their families, single parents, caregivers, and people impacted by cancer. So we have therapists that specialize in different areas, and one of the things we do is always ask clients about their preferences regarding a therapist. So if they have a preference in regard to race, gender, or even specialty, and we do our absolute best to match the client with a therapist that meets those qualifications.
Okay, great. So it sounds like PBCP casts a pretty wide net when it comes to mental health counseling for different communities. Now you have a new program, the WARMLine, which is being funded by a grant from the United Way of Central Maryland. Is that correct?
Yes. So the WARMLine, it was created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a partnership with the United Way of Central Maryland's 211 helpline. It is staffed by me, licensed mental health professional. And what we do is we provide direct short-term mental health support and intervention over the course of about a 30-minute phone call. And it's great for individuals who need someone to talk to or realize they might need some therapeutic support, whether that be because they've noticed some changes in their normal or typical behavior, they're having difficulty concentrating or sleeping, or something recently happened to them that they want to discuss. And if they're unsure about ongoing counseling, really great resource for them. And it is available 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned COVID. Let's talk about that a little bit. COVID has certainly brought up new mental health issues for people and also triggered previous ones. What sorts of issues are you hearing about from your callers?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's important to recognize that so many issues that people were already regularly dealing with have really been exacerbated by the pandemic. Most often when people are calling, it's because they're dealing with issues surrounding loneliness, anxiety, financial stress, grief. And we've noticed the majority of our calls are from older adults who are dealing with those issues.
Okay, all right. So if I'm experiencing any of the issues you just described, or even something completely different, how do I connect with a counselor at the WARMLine?
Yes, so you can can call the WARMLine, which is the best way to contact us. That number is 443-608-9182. But if for any reason you can't remember that phone number, that's okay. You can call 211, wait to speak to a representative, and you can ask to be connected to the WARMLine. I do want to add that we are not a substitute for a crisis line. So if someone is experiencing an emergency, I will connect them to a local crisis center. And if someone is experiencing suicidal thoughts, we always recommend they call that suicide prevention lifeline. That number is 800-273-8255.
Okay. And again, so it's literally that simple. You can just dial 211, ask for the WARMLine, and you'll be connected to a counselor. Or can you repeat the other number that you had mentioned that they should call?
Yes, the WARMLine number is 443-608-9182.
Okay, perfect. So once I do reach a WARMLine counselor, what sort of questions are they going to ask me? Like, could I, before I could actually have a conversation about what's on my mind?
It's a great question. I really try to get straight to whatever that person wants to talk about, what's on their mind, their reason for calling. And so I ask for very little information up front. I get a first name, the county that someone is calling from, their phone number in case the connection, so I can get with them, and their age if they're comfortable giving that information.
Okay, that sounds great. That doesn't sound like it's too much information. Are there any WARMLine eligibility requirements, such as income limitations or restrictions?
There are absolutely no income guidelines for speaking to me, WARMLine Specialist. We want this to be as accessible as it can be for anyone who needs it.
Okay. And how about some other things that people might be thinking about, such as minimum age, immigration status, or maybe even English language ability? Are any of those factors that would affect their ability to use the WARMLine?
Sure. None of those factors should impact anyone's ability. So we don't have any age limitations or restrictions. Children and teens can call without needing any guardian or parental permission.
Okay, great.
We don't ask about immigration status. We welcome all Marylanders to call. And we also are able to connect to an interpreter if the caller's primary language is not English, which is really helpful.
Wow, that actually sounds great. The WARMLine sounds like a really amazing program, especially because you have that ability to collect with the language line, but especially at a time when so many people are either having to spend no time with other people or maybe too much time with other people.
Yes, it's definitely a great resource, and we found that when we follow up with people afterwards, that they've generally had a very positive experience, and we've been able to connect them to resources that they need.
Okay, great. So when I talk with peacemakers, I'm always curious about their journey to doing this type of service work. Can you share how you were called to this type of work, and more specifically to the Pro Bono Counseling Project?
So I'm a social worker. I'm an LCSWC. The majority of my experience has been working with victims of domestic violence. So doing direct crisis work is something that I'm very comfortable with. When I saw Pro Bono Counseling Project's mission, I was really drawn to it. I think mental health care should be accessible to everyone. And I thought it was really wonderful that this job in particular was created in response to the pandemic. I think it's so important for everyone to help out in whatever way they can while we're in this crisis.
Absolutely. Great. So you'd mentioned that the WARMLine exists because of the unique mental health challenges that surfaced because of COVID. And peacemakers aren't immune to those challenges. So what sort of self-care practice have you yourself found helpful to get you through this past year?
I was one of those people who adopted a dog at the beginning of the pandemic. So I have 2 dogs now, and I spend a lot of time with them.
Okay, great.
I decided to try painting for the first time, and that's really been a fun creative outlet. And then self-care is also practical. So I make sure to stay up to date with guidelines and recommendations so I can make sure I'm keeping myself informed and keeping myself and the community as safe as possible.
Great, great. Well, Liz, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great speaking with you.
Great. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the Pro Bono Counseling Project and the WARMLine, you can find them online at probonocounseling.org. And if you'd like to learn more about the Baltimore Community Mediation Center, which offers voluntary confidential, and non-judgmental mediation services at no cost, you can find us at communitymediation.org.